guys, it's Jess. Welcome back to my channel. Today I am going to be sharing with you my July reads. I read a total of 4 books in July, and a few months previous to that I read nothing. So to go from reading nothing to 4 books in 1 month, I am pretty proud of myself, I'm not gonna lie. I read 1 non-fiction book and I also listened to an audiobook, so let's just delve straight into it. The first book that I picked up in July was this bad boy, The Planets by Andrew Cohen with Professor Brian Cox. So I don't know if any of you guys saw the TV series of this show when it was on TV in June, but if you haven't, you really should go and check that out because it was amazing. Everything Prof. Brian Cox does, I am there for, and I have quite a few of his books, and so I pre-ordered this, and when it came, I dropped everything to read it, and I'm so glad I did because it was just a really, really good read from start to finish. I do struggle reading non-fiction. It has to be something I'm interested in for a start, but it also has to be something that I can kind of understand a little bit, and that is what I like about these guys. They always write everything in a simplistic way that you're going to understand it, but at the same time they don't treat you like an idiot and they expect you to have a little bit of knowledge about what you're reading. This book just basically tells you about the planets in our solar system, and I love that they have a little narrative going on, so it's like the start of the universe and every planet's origin. But what they've done, which is really, really clever, and I haven't seen in any other book about the planets before, is that they have found a connection to every planet to each other, which is really, really interesting because I never knew that Mars, that's wrong. Because I never knew that Jupiter even was potentially the cause of the asteroid that wiped out the dinosaurs. Fun fact of the day. Yeah, and also I love how this book is laid out. There's so many pretty pictures in here. Let me just show you some. Oh gosh. Really pretty pictures. Really cool diagrams. I gave this book 5 stars on Goodreads, and I think you should all read it too. The second book that I read in July was Thunderhead by Neil Shusterman, and this is the sequel to Scythe, which I have on my shelf back there somewhere. When I read Scythe back in February, I was blown away. It was one of those books that I didn't really want to pick up because I'd seen like loads of hype about it. It was everywhere and I was just like, do I really want to? But I did, and I absolutely loved it, and I read it so quickly. It was just as good as Scythe. Not as good, but just as good. And I just love the whole world that it's set in. It's set in a world where death doesn't exist anymore. Everybody's immortal. Everybody's bodies are trained to, survive illnesses. There's these selected bunch of people called scythes who have the privilege to go around gleaning people or killing people to basically keep the Earth's population in check. And I found that subject really, really interesting. And we follow 2 characters called Rowan and Citra, who in the first book became Scythe's apprentices, and they had to kind of battle it out with each other to become a scythe. And in the second book we follow on from their journeys. I'm going to try and not spoil it too much for you guys, but their storylines are just so interesting. The one thing that I wished was in this book a little bit more was more of Rowan, because he is my favourite character and I felt like we didn't see a lot of him, and his storyline really, really interested me. But I loved just everything about this book. I loved all the characters. There's one particular character in this book that isn't a very nice character. She's not very likeable in the first book, and she's definitely not very likeable in the first half of this book. But towards the end, I started to feel a bit sorry for her, which When that happens, I'm like, oh my gosh, this guy can write. Because if you can make me feel sorry for a horrible character, you're doing a damn good job. It was also really interesting to learn more about the Thunderhead. The Thunderhead is like a big brother, all-seeing AI that exists in the world, and it has its own laws and its own rules in place to keep people in check. But the Thunderhead doesn't have any authority over the Scythedom, and the Scythedom doesn't have any authority over the Thunderhead. They can't contact each other. It was really interesting seeing those two things play out and learn a bit more about the Thunderhead. It's just so good. The world building is amazing. You really, really need to pick this up, guys, to know what I'm talking about. I gave it 5 stars on Goodreads. So the last physical book I read in July was Eve of Man by Giovanna and Tom Fletcher. Again, this is another book that I have been meaning to read for quite a while. My boyfriend gifted me this for Christmas and I've only just read it. I did a little readathon for myself when I had 3 days off work and I wanted to try and read 2 books in those 3 days. I only managed to finish this one. I finished this in about a day and a half, which is super quick for me. I never read a book that quick, ever. I have a lot of mixed feelings about this book because it's basically about a girl called Eve, and she's the first girl born in 50 years. For some reason, unknown to anyone, girls just stopped being born. And the thing that annoyed me about this book is that we never actually found out what was going on when girls stopped being born. Like, why did that happen? Why didn't you tell us why that happened? When I got towards like the end of the book, I was like, I really hope they throw something in there just to give us a little inkling of why that happened, and they just didn't. And I was a bit disappointed. I liked the slow burn romance. It's a little bit of a weird romance. It reminded me a little bit of some Black Mirror episodes that I've watched. It was a romance through like a artificial intelligence android thing. I don't really know how to explain it. I liked the pacing. I liked some of the plot twists that happened, but it just fell a bit flat for me. There was no real world building or anything. So I gave it 2.5 stars on Goodreads. I feel like that's a little bit harsh, maybe 3 stars. I did enjoy it, but there was just a lot of things missing for me. I know the second book is out or is coming out. I know there's a second book. And I might read it. I'm hoping they explain things a little bit more in terms of why no girls were born after a certain period of time. But I don't know if I'll be rushing to pick it up anytime soon. Sorry, guys. Okay, and lastly, mention to the audiobook that I read, or rather listened to. It was Daisy Jones and the Six. Yes, you bet you I finally jumped on that bandwagon. I've not read anything by Taylor Jenkins Reid before, although I do have the 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo on my TBR as well, which I've heard a good few things about. Daisy Jones and the Six just kind of came out of nowhere a few months ago and it blew up and everybody's been hyping it up, and I can totally understand why. I was going to buy the physical copy, but then I saw it was in interview format, and I don't really do well with that kind of format when I'm reading interviews in magazines, particularly when there's a lot of people involved in it. So I thought I would give the audiobook a listen, and I've also heard that that is the best way to go about listening to this book. And it really, really worked for me because I could hear all the individual character voices, so I could tell who was speaking straight away. It felt like I was listening to a podcast, which I've never had when listening to an audiobook before. I loved that format. It was just really, really interesting. It worked really well for this book. It's basically about a band called Daisy Jones and the Six, and it talks about their formation and the tours and the album that they released, and to their inevitable split at the end. There's a lot of drama, a lot of things that I would find quite trivial, but for this type of book and for this type of genre, it really, really worked. It is an adult book. It's not young adult at all. There's a lot of sex, drugs and rock and roll in it, so there are some subject matters that people might find a little bit but I really, really enjoyed it, and I would definitely recommend listening to the audiobook. It is worth your time. I gave it 5 stars on Goodreads. That is my July wrap up. Super happy with how I did, and I can't wait to fail miserably in August with the list of books that I have given myself. I think I'm a bit too hard on myself sometimes. I think I can manage another 4 books. We shall see how that goes. So thank you guys for watching again. I hope this video has been a bit more of an improvement than the last one, and I really, really hope that my camera stayed in focus, because I remember last time it just kept like focusing behind me, which kind of got annoying, but I refilmed that video like 5 times and it got to the point where I was like, I cannot be bothered anymore. Like I said, please give me some feedback if you have any. Constructive criticism is always appreciated. Again, book recommendations is also appreciated. I'd love to hear your thoughts on any of the books that I have mentioned in my videos today. I'm going to wrap this up here, guys. Follow my Bookstagram. I'll put the text here for you, and I will see you again next time. Bye!